This is one of the greatest masterpieces of Chinese landscape painting. Travelers Among Mountains and Streams, painted by the artist Fan Quan in the 10th century A.D. It was inspired by his wanderings in the unreal landscapes of Mount Hua, one of the 5 holy mountains of China. When Westerners first discovered Chinese paintings like this one, they could not see their value. They wouldn't even acknowledge them as art. But as Confucius noted, it is possible to look without seeing. If you learn to see beyond the surface of these paintings, you will discover their real beauty and find the deepest truths of the Chinese philosophies of life. As Chinese characters are symbols for ideas, so elements in a Chinese landscape, rocks, water, trees, and mountains, became symbols of concepts such as longevity and perseverance. For example, pine trees, as one ancient critic put it, are like people of high principles whose manner reveals an inner power. Indeed, one emperor bestowed the title of Mandarin of the 5th degree on a particularly ancient pine tree at the foot of a holy mountain. Bamboo, which flowers in winter and grows with measured stalks, is the symbol of strength against adversity, flexibility, and the character of an educated literary gentleman. So, for the Chinese, pictures painted with a brush, whether they be an ideograph, a tree, a rock, or a mountain, are symbols that carry both the surface meaning and additional hidden meanings that can be uncovered by the educated eye. Chinese paintings are not just pretty pictures, they mean something. Expressing feelings through artistic creation and adopted it for their own painting, most famously during the 14th century Yuan dynasty, when the native Chinese were conquered and ruled by the Mongols. During this time, the mandarins, who normally would have served at court, found themselves at a loss for what to do, since the Mongols chose not to employ most of them to administer their newly conquered empire. Those scholar officials who were invited to serve faced a terrible dilemma. If they joined the new Mongol administration, they could be branded traitors. If they withdrew out of loyalty to the vanquished Chinese emperor and finished their lives in seclusion, they would be forced to support themselves and their families as best they could with their talents. Most chose the latter path. The best of them, however, did not. Chao Mingfu became a high-ranking official in the Mongol court, and he was despised for it. Nevertheless, he became one of China's most famous artists. His emphasis on the blending of calligraphy, literature, and painting became the ideal for mandarins in later centuries. In this work, he made use of sparse and abbreviated brushstrokes to express his loneliness and inner longing for the open countryside with its mountains and woods. It is an evocation of a state of mind whose symbolic meaning far outweighs its depiction of reality. The undulating line of calligraphy to express the first rule of Chinese painting, the transmission of the spirit. And so, from the earliest times, the expressive line of calligraphy also flowed into the art of painting. Chinese painters often used black ink washes to depict color. In fact, they had an expression that all 6 colors could be effectively expressed using black ink alone. This painting by a Buddhist monk entitled Persimmons shows an incredible mastery of the subtleties of ink to suggest color. This is the 13th century artist Lang Kai's ink-wash painted immortal. We see the painter's tonal range varies from the sheer black of the immortal's belt, painted with heavily saturated ink, to the light washes used to paint his robe. Brush and ink work together to convey the artist's spirit when painting this immortal. Mountains fading into the distance were rendered by washes of light ink or blue color alone, without preliminary outlines or modeling. Shining, whose original name was Giuseppe Castiglione. His 8 prize steeds was depicted with near photographic realism, thanks to sophisticated techniques of anatomy and perspective developed in Europe since the Renaissance. But the Mandarin artists remained unimpressed. Like Su Shi centuries before, they felt that these realistic techniques were merely methods of creating an optical illusion. They felt Western painting missed the point, that the true reality of things lies behind the illusion of outward appearances. The Mandarin painters of China rejected representational realistic painting techniques because they failed to realize the first rule of Chinese art, to express the hidden reality behind the illusion of surface appearances. For example, in contrast to Western painting's utilization of a single fixed light source, one finds in Chinese painting a fluid interplay between light and dark, with no single source of illumination. This approach, which may at first seem to reflect a lack of understanding of the physical properties of light, highlights the Chinese painter's emphasis on movement, vitality, and spirit. In addition, Mandarin painters rejected single-point perspective. Unlike a Western landscape, the painting is designed to be looked into rather than looked at. So there is no single vanishing point. Instead, the viewer's eye travels around the scenery like a traveler wandering on foot. Said one 11th century critic, all landscapes should be viewed from the angle of totality, to see the totality of its unending ranges. In fact, many Chinese paintings adopted a moving perspective, a trick no still camera or fixed point of view painting could achieve. Chinese landscape artists would often incorporate different views of the same mountain into the same painting. So, how did they deal with the problem caused by putting different perspectives or views of the same subject right next to each other? Well, one way was to use mist or clouds to harmoniously integrate the different perspectives into a pleasing whole. A Chinese landscape artist wandered around a mountain or a garden, and returning to his scholar's desk, closed his eyes to meditate. He called upon his cultivated memory and deep emotion to paint the mountain from the angle of totality. For the Mandarins, Taoist meditation and artistic creation were inseparable. The idea precedes the brush was their motto. The unique landscapes of China, the origins of Chinese painting in brush calligraphy, and the unique culture of the scholar official artists that we know as Mandarins. Developed more than 1,000 years ago and brought to perfection by generations of master painters, Chinese paintings are far more than simple representations of what the eye sees. They seek to depict the essence of the subject, not its external appearance. When viewing a Chinese painting, accept the invitation of the artist to explore with him his experience of the fantastic landscapes of China, and pause to appreciate not only his skilled brushwork, but also the profound philosophies that inform his vision.